Welcome to the deep dive. You're ready to go deep. This time, we're diving into the world of online fandom and how do we deal when a creator we like, maybe does something controversial?
Yeah, it's tricky territory for sure.
Totally. And you specifically wanted to unpack the whole Mr. Beast situation, which I gotta say is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It really is. Because here's the thing that jumps out at me from everything you sent over. Despite all the criticism and stuff, his popularity is still huge, right?
Yeah, he hasn't seen the kind of drop that some creators do.
Right. So it feels like it's creating this divide. You have people who are diehard fans and then others who are like, nope, I'm out.
Definitely. A lot of strong feelings on both sides.
For sure. So that's what I really want to get into today.
Why is this such a complicated issue? And look, we're not here to tell anyone what to think, right? Absolutely not.
It's more like, let's just explore what's going on here. Maybe by the end of this, we'll all have a more, nuanced view of all the different sides of this whole thing.
Exactly, because there are a lot of layers to it.
Totally. So where do we even start with something like this?
Well, one of the biggest things to remember, especially with someone like Mr. Beast who's been around for a while, is the power of parasocial relationships.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, break that down for us. What's a parasocial relationship again?
So it's basically this thing where, as humans, we're kind of wired to feel connected to people we see regularly, even if it's just through a screen.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think about how TV shows used to be. You'd tune in every week, same characters, you felt like you knew them.
Totally.
It's the same idea with YouTubers, especially someone like Mr. Beast, who's been around for years.
Yeah, you've literally watched his channel grow, seen all the crazy stunts, maybe even felt like you were part of the good he's doing with all the giveaways. It's wild.
Absolutely. It's like keeping up with a friend, even though, it's not actually a two-way street.
Right, exactly. Okay, that's super interesting. But with Mr. Beast specifically, it seems like it goes even deeper than just entertainment.
Oh, for sure.
You've got the huge giveaways, that whole anyone can win thing.
It's wish fulfillment for a lot of viewers. What if that were me?
Exactly. And he comes across as such a regular guy. It makes it really easy to be like, oh, I could totally see myself being friends with that dude.
Totally. And then on top of all of that, you layer in the whole philanthropy angle. He's helping people with everyday struggles, funding surgeries, even tackling homelessness. It's a lot.
It's huge. And you can't deny the feel-good aspect of it all. It's even if the world feels kind of bleak sometimes, there's still good happening out there.
Which makes it all the more complicated, right? Because then you have to reconcile those good vibes with some of the, less than feel-good stuff. And it feels like that's where a lot of the internal struggle comes in.
It really is complicated. And the articles you sent, they show there's another side to this. It's not just people being, overly sensitive or whatever. Some people really struggled with it and actually unfollowed him, which is a big deal.
It is.
And those are tough decisions for people. So what are we talking about? What are the big criticisms?
Right. Well, there's the obvious one, right? The offensive language stuff.
Yeah, specifically what? Refresh my memory.
So there were some things he said, particularly early on in his videos, that were, pretty offensive, especially to the LGBTQ community.
Right. And, that's a big deal.
It is, and I think it's important to acknowledge that we're living in a different time now. What might have flown a few years ago is very different today.
Yeah, it's that whole thing, oh, that's just how it was back then.
Exactly, but it's not that people are suddenly too sensitive. It's more that there's just a lot more awareness now, a lot more discussion about what's acceptable and what's not.
Especially online, right?
Absolutely, and with creators who've built these huge followings who people feel like they have this connection with, it hits us differently.
It's like a friend saying something messed up as opposed to some random person online.
Exactly.
So it's not just about individual controversies. It's more about this bigger conversation about what it means to be a creator with a platform.
That's a huge part of it, yeah. And especially someone like Mr. Beast, whose audience is massive and skews young, there's a responsibility there. You have to think about the messages you're sending, even if it's not intentional.
Okay, so offensive language, we've got that.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What are the other big issues?
Well, there are some who argue that his content has shifted.
How so?
It's become more about extravagant spending, showing off wealth. And while, yes, he's incredibly generous, some people question the message that sends, especially to a younger audience.
It normalizes this level of consumption that's just not attainable for most people.
Exactly. And then you've got the fans who are stuck in the middle of all this. feeling conflicted, like they love his content, but they also have these valid concerns, it can be super isolating.
Yeah, one of the things that really stuck with me from the articles is how many fans mentioned being afraid to even talk about these things for fear of backlash.
Oh, for sure. It's a real fear, and it just shows how emotionally charged this whole thing is.
It's a lot, right? Like this whole conversation, it's everywhere online, not just with Mr. Beast.
Totally. It feels like every other day there's some new controversy.
Seriously. And it's like, how are we supposed to deal with this as fans? It can be so confusing.
It really can. And honestly, one of the things I really appreciated about the articles you picked out is that they don't just leave us hanging with all this, like, icky feeling, you know?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, a lot of articles, they just kind of lay out the drama and then they're done. But these, they actually give some advice for how we can, like, talk about this stuff in a way that's, I don't know, more constructive.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, because it's way too easy to just get, like, angry and defensive, especially online.
The worst. And as so often, those conversations just go nowhere.
Totally. So what are these articles saying? Like, what are some ways to actually talk about this stuff?
Well, the biggest thing is just remembering to be empathetic, like easier said than done, right?
Oh, yeah.
But before you jump into a comment section ready to fight, just take a second to think about where that other person's coming from.
It's true. We don't always know what someone else is going through.
Exactly. And something else they talked about that I thought was interesting was like sharing personal stories instead of just throwing facts at each other.
Oh, I like that. So instead of being like, well, statistically, it's more like, this is how this thing made me feel.
Right. It's way more powerful. And it can actually open the door for real conversation because you're being vulnerable, you know?
Yeah, you're not just trying to win the argument.
Exactly.
This has been honestly super helpful because at the end of the day, there's no easy answer, right? It's complicated.
It's so complicated. But just having these conversations, even if they're tough, is a step in the right direction.
It really is. Well, on that note, we're about out of time, but this has given me so much to think about. And I hope it's done the same for you listening. And hey, maybe this sparks some more deep dives for us down the road. Who knows? But until then, stay curious.